Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, depending, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. Once again, robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome to yet another Friday. I gotta say, outdoors, right outside of the Robservatory, there is no sun. There's a dull, kind of a grayish orange sky, and the sun is completely blotted out. There is, I guess, the Bobcat fire, whatever they're calling it, is not too many miles from where we are. We're not in any danger of being burned out or anything like that. But the air is thick with, the air feels heavy. It's not like just humidity, but the air is obviously, it's trapped underneath this layer of smoke. If you've seen photographs from space, the smoke over California, the LA basin, all of that, I mean, it's just, I've never quite seen anything like this before. And I mean, if it's going to happen, it's got to happen in 2020, right? I mean, and then I think it's only September. We've still got October, November, and December to deal with. I can't even imagine. But, when I got up this morning, I was thinking about 9/11. And I was thinking about where I was on 9/11 because, I was looking up today at the sky going, this is such a weird, it's so weird to be in a modern urban environment and the sun has been blotted out by a fire. And it's so incongruous, especially when you live in California, to anything that you know. It's one of those things that's unnatural, but I guess look, yes, a gender reveal party did start one of these fires, but I don't know if it started the one that's close to us. But it's still a strange, apocalyptic kind of thing to be watching. And I was thinking about, because it is 9/11, I was thinking about where I was on 9/11 in the morning of 9/11 of 2001, 19 years ago. And the strange thing is I know exactly where I was because I was working on the Usual Suspects DVD supplementary material. And I don't know if I told this story last year, but I'm going to tell it again. Just because I was thinking about 9/11, and because 9/11 was the day that I've been the most scared, existentially scared in my life. So what I was doing was, I was working on what's called I was working on a Mac, but I was using Avid software. Avid is a professional editorial software. Most people now use Premiere, but Avid's pretty much the gold standard when it comes to editing movies. And back then, I was using it to create all of the material for the Usual Suspects special edition DVD. I was working with Dave Parker, who directed The Hills Run Red, and I was working with Carrie David, who recently directed Breaking Their Silence, Women on the Front Lines of the Poaching War. The three of us were producing this disc. And what I was doing was finishing everything. I had to finish all the graphics. Everything had to be finished in the computer, and then we had to lay it back to tape, digibeta tape. And so what you have to do is I had to have all of the special features lined up, and then I would export everything. And they were 90-minute tapes. So I was exporting to digibeta, and I had to deliver to the studio, to MGM, the morning of September 11th. I had to deliver one tape which had texted material, meaning all of our titles, anything that was text on screen, that's called texted. And then there were untexted, so you deliver tapes that have no text on them, so they can, if they want to use them in foreign countries, they can translate them and put them on. So I had to deliver 6 tapes, which meant I had to do one at a time. So I was laying back the tapes because they were due at like 10 a.m. at MGM on September 11th. 2001. And so I was up all night because I was finishing everything. So I'd sleep for 90 minutes, lay back the tape, then switch the tapes out, and lay back another tape, and then switch the tapes out. So I had to do that 6 times. And when I woke up, I don't remember the actual time frame, but my edit bay was in like a mini mall, and out the back door of my edit bay, where my window looked out, there was a Circuit City that they were remodeling. And that morning when I got up, I was going to go down to the Starbucks because it opened at like 5. And I looked out, and all the guys that were remodeling, that were getting to work with their coffee, were standing in front of the Circuit City watching the TVs that were playing. And I was like, I wonder why are they all standing in front of the TV? Like, what is it, morning talk shows or whatever? But I knew it wasn't, because it was still early. And I walked out there, and I was standing with them and watching that one of the World Trade Center buildings had been hit by a plane. And they didn't know what happened, because no one actually saw it. And they didn't have that one piece of footage that one crew had. So nobody knew what happened. And everybody was kind of trying to figure everything out, like, oh my God, what's going on? And then I was standing there when the second plane hit. And it was strange, because I've never felt, it was clear when that happened that it was an attack. I mean, anybody that knows anything about anything, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. I mean, this was clearly an attack, and you could tell it was an airliner that went into the building. And it was so, I remember, like, yeah, I saw the old Richard Burton movie, The Medusa Touch, but seeing something like that in real life was so, as I was watching it, it was so surreal. But I remember, as soon as that happened, I got this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I never felt this way before, because not knowing what was going on, you're wondering, I mean, this is New York City. This is the Trade Center. When I first went to New York in 1990, my sister and I went on the roof of the Trade Center. You could go out literally on the roof and I have a picture of myself with my sister standing on the roof of the Trade Center. And when I went to New York for the first time, the thing about I'd never seen buildings that were that big. Like, standing in that courtyard looking up, they were huge. They were gigantic. And in my mind, they were so grand, and they were so large, and they were so massive that when I saw this plane hit and realized it was 2 planes that hit, I couldn't believe that anybody would want to do something like that. I mean, having stood in that courtyard and been up in that building, they were so, what the planes in the Twin Towers represented to me was sort of the pinnacle of human endeavor, that we could even build buildings that high, and that we could fly planes, jetliners that were that heavy. I mean, and as somebody who's always loved flying, and I love going to airports, and the first time I ever went on a plane was, we were first class in a 747, so I got to sit up and hang out in the top, the lounge that used to be up there. It was total old school, and that was the first time I was on a plane when I was 8. And I've just loved planes and flying, and I loved planes and flying before I ever went on one. But to see something like that, it was so terrifying to me on an existential level, because it meant that that there were people in the world that would take all of human endeavor, everything that we had aspired to do as a race of sentient creatures on this planet, and destroy it. Like, somehow, like, that was okay, for whatever reason, for whatever the grievances might be. And there are a lot of people that have a reason to have grievances, especially with the United States, if they're coming from the Middle East, which I completely understand. But the ways of going about affecting change. And then, of course, I immediately went home, because I called the studio, and they were saying the studio is closed. It was pandemonium. Nobody knew what was going on. So I got home. At the time, I was recently married, and I was just sitting there with my wife, and we were sitting looking at the screen, and the towers came down. And it was terrifying. I mean, and I had this real problem. I was like, well, why would anybody do this? You know, what would be the point? And I just couldn't get over. I mean, there were people that were, of course, jumping out windows, and people didn't know, what was going on. And that kind of destruction, my biggest fear, I've talked about this I've talked about this on the show before. My biggest fear in life is the destruction of social order, civilization, civility. And we're always one step away from that. You're one step away from somebody breaking down your door and having no disregard, having no regard at all for life. And, if you encounter somebody like that, there's nothing you can do. Your life might be over. And that kind of, you turn into the apocalyptic road warrior society or whatever. And when I saw that happening, it was like my greatest fear realized. And I thought, this is it. Suddenly planes are going to fall out of the sky. All of our cities are going to be attacked. I had no idea. Nobody had any idea what was going on. And with my wild imagination, I was off in Never Land, and I had scared myself into sort of this existential, deep, dark pit. And I'd never been there before, because I'd never felt this way before, because I'd never seen anything like this before. And when those buildings fell, it was the most horrific thing I've ever seen to this day in my life. And I mean horrific thing to experience, to be watching live. And I mean, I could say that when I was jumped in Australia by those 4 guys and they were beating the shit out of me, that I didn't have time to really worry about that. That was more PTSD later. In the weeks afterwards, I would find myself just getting really angry about what happened to me. But it wasn't like this. And it was just so antithetical to my way of thinking that somebody would do this and that it even happened. And it made me realize, well, that's the world we live in now. This can happen, and it will happen. Thankfully, it hasn't happened. Nothing to that on that scale has happened again, but it was still something. And every day, every 9/11, I keep thinking about the people that were in those planes and the people that were in the buildings, and then all the first responders, all the people that went in to rescue everybody that was in that building. People who selflessly ran in thinking, they couldn't even imagine what was going to happen, because if you'd ever been around the World Trade Center, there's no way those buildings would ever fall down. How could they do that? So I every 9/11, I do think of everybody involved. And I always kind of just take a moment and I think to myself, I'm still here. The world is still a pretty great place to live. And hopefully that'll just go down in history as a minor blip. But to me, it's something that it's always worth remembering. It's always worth remembering that somewhere out there are people that think that it's okay to lose our civilization, no matter what. On a small scale, a large scale, there's always a little taste of it out there. There's always a tiny, and we've seen a little bit of that here over the summer. We've seen a little bit about that. The seeds of that kind of feeling, and it always comes down to ultimately the respect that people should have for one another. And we have to be mindful again that each and every one of us, as Dr. Manhattan said, the thermodynamic miracle of life, each and every single human being is unique to this universe. And the idea that we would want to bring another person's life to an end prematurely is something that we should never grow used to having happen. And I don't know. Anyway, just what I was thinking. I thought I should acknowledge 9/11, all of the people that we lost on that day, both in the buildings and on the planes and on the ground, all of the first responders that selflessly just the call, went into those buildings, didn't think twice. And having worked over the last 3 years with first responders, creating a medical lecture series in crisis medicine that I'm very proud of working on. And you can see that, by the way, at crisismedicine.com. But when I was working on that and talking to paramedics and talking to first responders, it was never far away from my mind that when you work with people like that, you hear their dedication to life, limbs, and the pursuit of happiness for everybody that they are there to take care of. So it's not just we shouldn't just remember the people who are no longer with us or that lost their lives on that day, but every one of the first responders that's out there, police, EMTs, paramedics, they're out there and they are willing to put their lives on the line. And sometimes we forget. I'm not saying that everybody's perfect, because they're not. And of course, there's a lot of things that we can do to make things better. But on a day like 9/11, it's nice to remind, I think, everybody that part of what living in a civil society is knowing that we have people that are always willing to guard it and to make sure that people are taken care of, so they can indeed live the life that they deserve to live, because it's over too quickly, so we might as well stick around as long as we can. I know that's not exactly the topic that I usually discuss on this show, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Now, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, gentle beings, whoever you identify or however you identify, across those 28 known galaxies, I was looking for something to talk about today that wasn't so morose. And, in a way, I while 9/11 was horrible, I think it's it's a place that we could look at and take stock in and hopefully move forward and learn something from it. But there was an article I was thinking about. I was just thinking about tentpole movies. And I was thinking about the movies that we're seeing, having Wonder Woman now moved to December, and thinking about maybe Dune getting pushed. I can't see Warner Brothers opening Dune and Wonder Woman within a week of each other. Maybe they will. I don't know. Because there is a lot of crossover with that audience. But we shall see. But what I was thinking about is there's a movie coming out I saw a trailer for called The Father with Anthony Hopkins. And apparently it's a psychological thriller. It seems like at first it was a movie about Anthony Hopkins losing his marbles. And indeed, it looks that way, but there's also his daughter who may or may not be scheming to get stuff from him before he passes away. It looks really, really good. And I was thinking of all the movies that are coming out. While I can't wait to see Dune and I can't wait to see Wonder Woman, I certainly can't wait to see No Time to Die. The movie that I was most intrigued by was The Father, because that was something new. And it was something that, this looks good. The idea that what if you are losing your marbles, but at the same time, you're suffering from dementia, but at the same time, you're being victimized by your own daughter, who may or may not want to take your estate, get all your money when you pass away. And the trailer really intrigued me, and I realized that that's what intrigues me about movies, the different stories and the different things that we get. And one of the byproducts of, I think, the world that we live in is we are getting less and less interesting smaller movies that are going to be theatrically released. There's a lot of stuff that goes directly to streaming, sure, but I think that we're missing something. And I was just thinking about that, and then I read an article today. It just popped up. It was published 2 days ago on Medium, and the article is written by Drew McGarry, and it was on Medium, and it was a column, and I was like, man, I totally agree with that. And here is the article. How Hollywood Killed the Director. And he starts, now is not the time to tell people that a rare piece of good news is actually bad news. The only good news is bad news. Elliot Carver said that. But allow me to be king asshole for a moment, won't you? Here is the good news in question. A few weeks ago, Deadline reported that Olivia Wilde was signing to direct a Marvel movie. Not just any Marvel movie, but a Spider-Woman movie. Marvel is happy, Wilde is happy, even fanboys and fangirls, an impossibly prickly lot, are happy. Or at least as happy as that strain of humanity gets. And why wouldn't they be? Marvel makes good movies. Wilde made a movie last year in Booksmart that had such a clear voice to it, funny and almost painfully current, that it only makes sense to imbue Spider-Woman with that same voice. It's a perfect match. Everyone wins. Now, he's right about that, because when I saw it, Booksmart, it took me a while to catch up with it, but when I finally saw it, the first thing that really struck me about Booksmart is, yes, I like the two central performances, but as a first-time feature director, I thought Olivia Wilde knocked it out of the park. Really stylishly directed, very assured, great performances, and a lot of just directorial flourishes I think were great. And the first thing I thought about when the movie was over, I'm like, I can't wait to see what Olivia Wilde is going to do next, and hopefully she'll still be pursuing this kind of filmmaking where she's delving into human relationships and everything. So when I heard that she was going to direct, like the author of this article just said, Spider-Woman, I'm like, oh, on one hand, okay. But as I know, when you're working on a studio tentpole property, even though you're the director, you're still working in partnership with the studio. The studio oversees what you're doing, and they'll allow you to work within certain parameters, but beyond those parameters, it's not like they're going to let you do something avant-garde in their Spider-Man movie. They can't. I mean, and it's not the studio's fault. It's just the material that they are using. And now in this day and age, studios want people of color, they want women, they want all people that don't normally or haven't been normally directing these kind of movies to direct them, which makes sense. However, what I worry about is what this author's article goes on to say. So I'm happy for Olivia Wilde, but at the same time, I would like to see what a follow-up, what is personal to her. Like, what is she going to follow up Booksmart with? Because I think whatever it's going to be, it's going to, as she works through her filmmaking, I'd love to see, I miss following people like, say, Spike Lee. I mean, I still follow Spike Lee, but Spike Lee never really jumped over and made some big franchise property, whether you're watching She's Gotta Have It or Mo Better Blues, or even Inside Man, which was definitely a studio movie, but it was done with Spike Lee's inimitable sensibility, and I like that. And that's what excites me about filmmakers. You know, I think that's what, when Martin Scorsese was talking about superhero movies, what he meant was that the superhero movies, the template for them and the way they're done and what the studio expects are sort of predetermined. And while you do get a James Gunn or a Taika Waititi and they can do things that are certainly their own, you're still working within this paradigm. And in terms of getting exciting cinema, you're not going to get like the Apu trilogy from Marvel. You know, you're not going to get Jules and Jim from the DC universe, although watching the DC universe equivalent of Jules and Jim might be interesting. I don't know how that would work, but it would be interesting. But anyway, the article goes on to say, and that's the big fucking lie. Wilde just got assimilated into the new film industry Borg. It's a good Borg, mind you. She's going to get paid bank and have an opportunity to put her imprintur on big shit comic book characters. Some of that imprintur probably in the form of a few brilliant lines of dialogue and a flash of wholesome raunch. But it's still going to be a Marvel movie. Marvel makes these movies with occasional input from Reddit. No one else really gets to. I was thinking about all of this because Twitter user Maplewell Pulps posted this scene from Spider-Man 2 at the end of July. And here it is, and you can see it if you want to find it. That scene went viral because it's fucking awesome. I'm not going to play it because they'll do something. Twitter will do something. But it's also because you will not see a scene that looks like this in any tentpole superhero movie going forward. Spider-Man 2 was a Spider-Man movie, but it was first and foremost the work of Sam Raimi, the beloved Evil Dead director who had the good sense, and more important, the permission, to lend that movie his own affectionate B-movie stylings. Once Spider-Man 3 got laughed out of theaters, Raimi was never allowed near the franchise again. He is, of course, directing Spider-Man. After 2 Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies that Sony made essentially to keep the character as its intellectual property, Marvel repossessed Spider-Man and Marvelized it into 2 hit movies. I adored the first one. I cannot, for the life of me, tell you who directed it. Mark Webb? No, Mark Webb directed these. Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. Wilde's Spider-Woman movie is going to be good, but I have zero doubt about that. I also have zero doubt that Marvel will skillfully sand away most, if not all, of the edges in her voice so that it fits, well, Sony will, Marvel won't. So it fits neatly into their Marvel brand, and the real crime is that everyone will be happy about this shit. I saw Marvel fanboys rush to pile on Martin Scorsese last year when he took a dump on the company. And a lot of directors now are fanboys and fangirls themselves, so it's no challenge to get them to agree to come into the fold, because what other kinds of movies does Hollywood even bother to make anymore? You either step up to their big leagues or you toil in the indie cinematic universe until you're dead and broke. So now we have a film industry system where promising directors voluntarily help the machine to do its business and subsume their own independent visions to do so. I don't want Wilde making a Marvel movie. Booksmart was my favorite movie of last year, and I wanted her next movie to be her own. If Wilde succeeds with Spider-Woman, and I have little doubt she will, maybe she'll get to do the one for them, one for me thing that keeps your average A-list director, which Wilde also happens to be both wealthy and creatively satisfied. But in order to do that deft bit of juggling, you still need movie studios that make movies that fit into the one for me category, and most studios don't. Disney sure as fuck doesn't. Hell, the only reason Wilde probably got to make Booksmart to begin with was because of her already established success as an actress. Alfonso Cuarón was able to blaze his own trail after doing a very good Harry Potter movie, but Cuarón looks an awful lot like the exception to the rule. So the more likely outcome is that Wilde gets to make Spider-Woman 2, and it earns more money and online accolades for helping add female voices to a tentpole process that remains a half-century behind where it needs to be. The directors most likely to flourish right now are the ones whose personal aesthetics just happen to align with large-scale productions of existing IP. The prime example of this is Christopher Nolan, who used a brilliant independent movie in Memento to get himself a job on Batman Begins, and has since been given free rein to make whatever lavish ideas come into his crisply dressed mind. I just want to point out that obviously this is more of an op-ed piece because there's factual inaccuracies in it. After Memento, Warner Brothers tapped Christopher Nolan to make their remake of Insomnia. That was, I think it was a Danish movie. So he remade Insomnia first, proving that he could do a good job working within the studio system. And it was his work on Insomnia that was able to get him to work on Batman Begins. I mean, you could say that it was Memento that did it. Memento is what got him noticed by the studios. He went from doing Following to Memento, then he did Insomnia, and then he was given a franchise property. But he still had to prove himself on a less risky venture working with two great actors in Insomnia. That's how Nolan ended up with not only the money to make Tenet, but also the juice to insist that Tenet appear only in theaters in the middle of a global health crisis. Tenet made $20 million here in the United States over the weekend, and I hope no one dies from seeing it. Well, in this article, I have to point out that, of course, Christopher Nolan was the master at using his studio clout to do the one for me, one for them. Batman Begins, you go then do The Prestige, then you come back and you do The Dark Knight, and then you make Inception. The Prestige was based on a book. Inception was original. Then you make The Dark Knight Rises, then you can go do something like Interstellar. What Christopher Nolan was really able to do was the success he had at Warner Brothers. He was able to get Dunkirk made, which is a movie about something happened in World War II to the Brits, but Warner Brothers agreed to finance it, and not only did they finance it, they made a lot of money off that movie for what it was. And that was, I think, more than anything else, obviously the Batman movies were incredibly successful for Warner Brothers, especially the last two. So Nolan solidified himself there. But even with that kind of money, that doesn't necessarily make sure that Warner Brothers is going to make a Dunkirk just to keep somebody happy. But they did, and it made money. So Christopher Nolan, his one for him and one for them, has worked out pretty well. But that's not normal right now because, as this article points out, studios aren't usually even making movies like Dunkirk. And the only way that you can get a studio to make a movie like Dunkirk is if you're already as established as Christopher Nolan was. No other director who occupies the non-Spielberg division of the studio system has this perfect alignment of taste and financial viability. Sam Mendes, Lord Miller, and Ryan Coogler, all men, have come close. The only directors who can make whatever movies they want are guys who blew up back in a more auteur-friendly time. The Coens, Quentin Tarantino, and ironically, Martin Scorsese. No one else is welcome. The system won't allow for them. Shit, Lucasfilm explicitly designed the last Star Wars movie as a transparent rejection of the Star Wars movie Rian Johnson tried to make prior to it. That's how hostile the terrain is. The late producer Robert Evans once lamented the advent of the possessory credit. You'll recognize this credit anytime you see the words "a Tommy Wiseau film" brandished across your screen. This is a credit that the Directors Guild long ago fought to establish, and Evans noted that it diminishes the work of everyone else on the movie, most notably the producer. Was Evan bitching about this because he himself was the producer? You know it, baby. Did he also happen to be right? Fuck yeah, he was. But Evans failed to see a future in which the likes of Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige could create a tier of film possession above what directors had already established, thereby turning every gifted director into a hired gun. A well-respected hired gun, but a hired gun all the same. So that's why it sucks that Wilde got her ticket to the show. I'm not going to be able to see the movie she would have been able to make instead. And how many other directors am I missing out on? How many are you missing out on? You never know. And the Marvel product is so well made that you won't bother to ask. You'll go back to a theater once the pandemic ends. You'll sit in your seat. And you'll notice a goddamn logo before you notice anything else. So I thought that was a really interesting article, and I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, I've been thinking about that as far as Hollywood is concerned for a long time, because a lot of the movies, I mean, I think of directors that I really enjoyed growing up, John McTiernan being one. You know, his first feature that he also wrote was a horror movie starring Pierce Brosnan called Nomads. Pretty interesting film. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Then, of course, he made movies like Predator. Then he made Die Hard, and then he made The Hunt for Red October. And as far as Powerhouse Studio movies are concerned, all three of those movies were franchise starters, and they were all great, but they weren't franchises yet. And he brought something really unique to the game, and we don't get those movies anymore. I mean, you're not going to get an original Predator movie. I mean, a Predator film, something like it that doesn't yet exist. Like, a studio's not going to take, I mean, unless it's coming from some other IP, they're not going to take a chance on a movie like that. Netflix will, the streaming services will, but that's kind of not the same thing, because when you're, even as a film fan, know that when I see a movie on Netflix, as much as I might like it, the people that made it they don't sink in as much. You know, you watch them and you watch the movies, then it's on to the next thing that you're watching, the streaming show you might hit or whatever. But the careers that used to be made, that when somebody makes a great movie and suddenly you're the toast of the town and you go to all these meetings, and I mean, I'm sure that still happens, but I don't think that landscape it's so different now, because everybody wants to be in business with the studios, especially the agencies and the managers. They want to get into business with the studios, but that's what you're doing. When you're getting into business with Marvel as a director, as this points out, it's not about you. It's about the MCU. It's about the Marvel movie. So your imprimatur as a director is important, but look at like Captain Marvel. You know, Patty Jenkins was lucky to have come back and do Wonder Woman 2. Patty Jenkins didn't direct a movie for 14 years after she made Monster, which won an Academy Award for Charlize Theron. I mean, how could she not have directed a movie for 14 years? She comes back and she does does Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 2, and the co-directors of Captain Marvel, they're not directing the follow-up. Where are they? You know, and it's a strange world that we live in. I mean, I grew up thinking, because I was following filmmakers, you know, whether it was Cronenberg or John Carpenter or John Landis or Joe Dante. It was the people that were, and then later on people like Barry Levinson. You know, you make a diner and then you follow somebody's career. But nowadays, a lot of times when somebody directs a movie that you like, are they going to work again? It's a tough one. Gareth Edwards, you know, you make a movie like Monster, and that's a $250,000 movie. He did the effects for it. Then he gets subsumed or whatever, taken in by the Hollywood system. He goes and makes Godzilla. Then he goes and makes Rogue One. But where's he now? You know, Rian Johnson was smart. Rian Johnson began in indie cinema, making a movie like Brick, Brothers Bloom. You know, he parlays it in, works on things like Breaking Bad. He does make Last Jedi, but then he comes back and he makes Knives Out, and now he's doing the sequel. At least I like Rian Johnson as a filmmaker. I enjoyed Brick. I want to see where he goes. I like Knives Out. It was great to see him come back in a movie like Knives Out that Lionsgate puts out, make some money. So we get another voice. And nowadays, when I don't even know who made The Father. I just saw the trailer yesterday. It was totally off my radar. But when I watched that trailer, I'm like, okay, I want to see this. But who was that director? I don't know. You know, even Danny Boyle, who's most of his career, the guy's won Academy Awards, most of his career has been jumping from one film to another. Even a guy like Danny Boyle, when he makes a follow-up movie to Trainspotting, arguably one of his most famous films, it gets released in America and nobody goes to see it. I know people that liked Trainspotting that don't even know there's a sequel with all the same characters and all the actors coming back. I mean, that's kind of the world that we live in today. So the world I wanted to be a part of really no longer exists, which is sort of interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's depressing. I don't know what it is. It's just new. And I feel like it adds to, I mean, I believe in the auteur theory. I do. You have to have a director who's calling the shots, that really understands what's going into this movie, what it's supposed to be. Because if not, then it becomes very quickly, if you do not have a strong directorial voice at the helm of any project, it will not come out well, or it will not come out as well as it should be. You have to have a director who's involved with every single aspect, starting with developing the script, to all the pre-production, to the actual direction on set, and then the years it could take to edit a movie. You have to have a singular vision at the end of the day. That doesn't mean you can't consult, but you have to have a singular vision. That's why I am a believer in the auteur theory. I've seen it. I've worked with directors. I've been a director myself, and I do believe in that. But nowadays, I think that what the point this article is making, I didn't take. I've directed one movie, and I did not take a film by credit, because really it was something that my friend Mark Altman and I did together. And I have no problem. I had no problem not taking the film by credit. It was the first and so far only movie I've made, and hopefully I'll make more. But filmmaking is a collective effort, but you still need a strong directorial division. But the point or directorial, not division, vision. But the point that the article is making is now the MCU is indeed above the director, in terms of the MCU has become more like television, where the executive producer's vision and the vision of the studio is really more important than anyone's individual visions. Now, people like Taika Waititi and like James Gunn and the Russo brothers, were able to put their imprintures on these movies, but it's with a synergistic relationship with the studio. And I would imagine that sometimes, if you asked certain directors that worked on those movies, I think some directors spent a lot more time in post with those movies than, say, other directors might have. Now, again, I don't mean to disparage anyone or cast aspersions on Marvel, but I do think that might be the case. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing more Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. But I'm also looking forward to seeing a movie like The Father, which I believe is based on a novel. And, so bring that on. Whoever made The Father, I'm assuming it's good. I don't know if it's good because I haven't seen it. But after you see something like that that's good, you follow those directors, and they become people that you incorporate, whether they're men, women, whatever country they're from. I follow directors' movies, and I have my whole life. And right now, when you think about it, Christopher Nolan's certainly a director I will go see anything that he makes. Martin Scorsese, I will go see anything that Martin Scorsese makes. Sam Raimi, even though he's making a Doctor Strange movie, I would see anything that Sam Raimi makes. Because people that have a distinct directorial vision it's like reading an author. It has something to say that you enjoy. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. What do you think? And now, of course, I'm turning it over to what you guys think, because there is certainly a lot of stuff to say, and we shall see what it is. So the first letter I'm going to read is from the chairman himself, Jeffrey Mao. Ooh, this is timely. Jeffrey Mao says, "Greetings, Rob, and all of the Post-Geek Singularity. Once again, it is I, the chairman, bringing all of my initial impressions of the Alfred Hitchcock Classics collection, newly released by Universal, featuring new 4K Ultra Blu-ray HDR versions of Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, and the Birds. I would say this is an essential purchase. I have not purchased it yet, but it is an essential purchase for anybody who wants to get or collects physical media. These films are among the Master of Suspense's most famous and beloved films. Needless to say, anytime you can get a collection of films in 4K such as these from a director like Hitchcock, you have to get it. We're seeing more and more of such collections coming, whether it be from a studio like Columbia or as a collection of filmmakers' works such as Alejandro Jodorowsky. Oh, which, by the way, that reminds me. No, that's not it. Well, it's somewhere here. Where did it go? It's disappeared. I did get that Jodorowsky set, and I was going to show it to you. That was from Arrow from the UK. I was only able to give all 4 films a cursory glance, mainly of the 4K discs of the films themselves. The package comes with a lot of extras on both the 4K disc and the Blu-ray disc. One thing that I have to give Universal a lot of credit for is that they load up a lot of extras on the 4K disc, which you got with Jaws, Blues Brothers, and others. For those who like to watch the extras, it's nice not to have to switch to the Blu-ray just to watch them. In terms of 4K HDR spectacle, which is what I'm sure most of the purchasers of this collection got it for, the winner has to be Vertigo. I can't wait to see that. Anyone who knows the film is anticipating how good it will look in 4K HDR, and this disc doesn't disappoint. Vertigo benefits the most from HDR, as it's the most colorful of the four films by far. The red interior of the restaurant where James Stewart Scotty first sees Kim Novak is so rich, it feels like you can reach out and touch it. The green of Novak's dress is lush and satiny, as is the green in her car. Certain shots belie the film's age, looking like a much more recent film. I don't know whether how good it looks is due to the overall quality of the original elements, or it was due to the prior restoration done by Robert Harris and James Katz, about whom I wrote in my previous letter, which brought out the color grading. Rear Window doesn't look too bad either, although it's less colorful, but I haven't watched it in a long time, and I only watched a bit of the beginning of the disc. It's pretty colorful, too. The courtyard's pretty colorful in all the different apartments. Again, Rear Window had a significant past restoration as well, done by Harris and Katz, and I'm wondering if the 4K transfer was done off the restored elements. I'm going to assume that restorations are cumulative, in that if the film was restored in the past, especially if it was far enough in the past that the digital intermediate wasn't used, perhaps the restored version was struck as an interpositive and the 4K scan was done off of that. They probably went back and did go off the negative. Or to borrow a phrase from car restoration, they wouldn't do it from the ground up, would they? They probably would. Start completely from the original negatives, ignoring anything done before. It sounds like it would be too time consuming and money wasting to me. I think they might have created something new. Who knows? I'm not sure. A new negative or something. Turning to Psycho, as a black and white film, it won't benefit from a wider color gamut, but certainly the HDR helps with the range of shadows and increased depth and clarity. As I understand it, like with Jaws, Universal had scanned the film in 4K 10 years ago for the 50th anniversary Blu-ray, so we're getting basically that scan now as a full 4K disc. If you have that Blu-ray, I'm sure you won't get a lot of picture quality improvement. The situation is similar to the difference between the Criterion Collection Dr. Strangelove and the recent Columbia Classics 4K version of it. You're not getting massive improvements in the 4K over the Blu-ray, basically. One thing I did notice is that during the iconic shower scene in Psycho, you can actually faintly see the killer's eyes, which I've never noticed in any version before. I don't know if this was intentional on Hitchcock's part, or if this is just a result of the increased clarity of the 4K image. Finally, with regard to the birds, it had the look of just a really good Blu-ray. It wasn't bad, but it certainly didn't look like a brand new film the way that Vertigo did in places. There was nothing wrong with almost any of the shots. There were no flaws really to speak of. It just doesn't pop like Vertigo. It doesn't make you go, wow, that looks amazing. Part of it could definitely be due to the color palette that Hitchcock used, or the film elements themselves, the actual film stock, which was much less vibrant than Vertigo. None of the characters wear anything very bright. The outdoor settings are pretty normal, being set on the coast. There isn't a lot of variety, and the air has an occasional gray tinge to it. And of course, parts of the film are set at night. Again, I don't want to overly trash the image quality because it is a film from 1963, and I, of course, never watched it in the theater, so it could be a case of the negative or other elements were just not taken care of as well as the other films. Or it could be a case of it is what it is. You can't make better than that. I also got the Universal 4K of Spartacus, which I have not yet watched. It is tasty. But I have a feeling that based on other reviews and comments, it will look better than the birds. Once I get to watch it, I'll write in with my thoughts. Being that it is also a Universal disc, it will be interesting to compare Spartacus to the Hitchcock films and see how the image quality differs. Yet again, Spartacus was previously restored by Harris and Katz, and if it looks just as good on 4K as their other restorations, and I'm willing to bet that it will be, then it will be pretty obvious that it seems to be the key reason why those films look better than the birds. Well, those are my thoughts for now. Let me know if you've gotten or are going to get the set, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. I am going to get the set. I hope it hasn't sold out yet. These sets, what's really interesting is these, I mean, you know what I didn't get? I thought I could get it, but I was an idiot, is Arrow's Gamera set. Gone, even on their website. I was going to order it. It is gone. What a mistake it was. Those Arrow sets, if you don't get those Arrow sets in the first week, man, those special edition sets for the most part, if they have any kind of mass appeal to them or genre fan appeal, they're gone. It was stupid of me not to get that Gamera set. I'll probably get it, but I'll have to buy it on the secondary market for some ridiculous amount of money. But don't sleep on Arrow. If Arrow puts out something, you got to get it. Anyway, but thanks for writing in, Jeff. That was a great letter. Appreciate it from our chairman, Mr. Jeffrey Mao. A great letter. And I wasn't here yesterday, obviously, and although the situation hasn't really changed much, to be honest. So, yeah. Here's a letter from Phil. Hey, Rob and the PGS. So we finally got the first trailer for Dune. About time. I cannot wait for Denis Villeneuve's vision to get to the screens, as I love his sensibilities and passion as a director and storyteller. Earlier today, I watched your reaction on John Campia's show, and I do think you both had some good points. John Campia regarding the marketing red flags, and yours regarding the target audience. I did quite like this trailer, but I would like to add that I thought too many scenes made me think of scenes from the original movie. I totally agree with that. At first, I thought this was an odd choice, but then I made the connection to your thoughts, and it made sense. Although this is not necessarily a bad thing, it was something that did bother me a bit. Even though I know this is just a trailer, it does look like Warner Brothers are barking up the wrong marketing tree again. But hey, as long as they don't interfere with Denis Villeneuve's vision, I'm all in and cannot wait. Thanks, and everyone stay safe. Phil. Well, I've watched the Dune trailer, 20 times. And I have to say, I'm very excited. There's a lot of reasons that I'm excited to see another iteration of Dune. One, I always loved the book when I was a kid. One of the first books I got from the Science Fiction Book Club, I got Dune, Children of Dune, and Dune Messiah. Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune. And I love the books because those are the only ones that had come out when I joined the Science Fiction Book Club. God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House Dune hadn't come out yet. So I was a big fan of the Dune books. I was surprised, with Denis Villeneuve's take on Dune is very similar aesthetically to David Lynch's Dune, and David Lynch's Dune might even have more color in it, and it doesn't have a lot of color in it. And I sort of thought that was kind of crazy because one of the things, you don't really hear much about him anymore, but there was a science fiction artist named Chris Foss. And there was a book I had of his called 21st Century Foss. And he had a very distinct, very bold, bright, brash style. And he painted lots of starships and he did a lot of design for Dune, and he did there was designs he did for things like Alien. But if you look at his books, they're really colorful and vibrant for the most part. And I know if you look at Arrakis in the movie, that's the planet Dune, and you look at we do see glimpses of Caladan, and I think there's a couple shots of Giedi Prime, although I don't remember. Now, I watch trailers so much, there's maybe they're on Giedi Prime. There's one shot of what looks to be the Harkonnens assembling. It isn't like certainly the Giedi Prime in David Lynch's version is kind of a hellish nightmarescape. The juxtaposition between Caladan and Giedi Prime was pretty interesting. But I did feel that Denis Villeneuve's the trailer was a bit monotone in terms of tone and color, and I feel it really was heavily influenced by Lynch's version of Dune. Certainly the still suits are. Denis Villeneuve has talked about that. And also one of the things that Phil was mentioning in the article or in his letter is that I feel that they leaned too heavily on the fact that people either knew what Dune was. I've talked to a lot of people, Mike Kalinowski, who I knew from the Schmodown, really nice guy. He made a comment on Twitter. He says, listen, I legitimately want to know why is everybody so excited about Dune? And what I find really interesting is that I think people are really excited about Dune because of Denis Villeneuve. I don't think it's because they know Dune. They might know it. They might have seen the Lynch version or maybe not. There's a lot of people. Remember, that movie came out in 1984, so it's 36 years old. The Sci-Fi Channel miniseries is a little different. But I really do think it's because people like Denis Villeneuve's movies. If you like Sicario, if you like Arrival, if you like Blade Runner 2049, if you like Prisoners, he's a world-class filmmaker, so anything he makes, people are going to see. But I don't necessarily think people know what Dune is. And I think they made the mistake. We do. If you're an imagination connoisseur, you know what Dune is, but the average person, think about it. Would they know what Dune is? Most people don't. I mean, if you're 30 years old right now and you were born in 1990, you would have been, what, around 10 or something when the Dune miniseries aired, and then the Dune Messiah, Children of Dune follow-up aired. That's not something you would necessarily see because it wasn't like on network television. And if you were 10, why would you watch it? So you have 30-year-olds who might have heard of Dune, but are relatively probably unfamiliar with Dune, yet are right there in the target movie-going audience. And that first trailer for Dune, they act like everybody already knows what it is. And I know when I was working on Chronicles of Narnia, I don't know if I told this story before, but when I was working on the Chronicles, my company was hired to work on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. One of the things that I said to Disney, and they bought off on this, and they gave us a really healthy six-figure budget to create this, I said, what we should do in advance of Narnia coming out is we should make like a primer disc. And I had pitched this idea that we would do a retrospective documentary with all of these other authors. And indeed, we interviewed everybody from Octavia Butler to Clive Barker to Terry Brooks, who writes the Shatner books. And it was this, we were going to interview them. That was going to be like an hour and a half documentary. Then there would be a 3D interactive map of Narnia and the political structure and the whole timeline and everything, so you could find out everything you needed to know about Narnia. And then there was going to be an extended look, like a half-an-hour look at the making of Chronicles of Narnia. And that would come out a few weeks before the movie at places like Best Buy for a price that makes it, like $9.95 or something cheap, even cheaper. Walmart, you could buy it, and we were making that. We were doing, for various reasons, Disney pulled the plug on everything that we were doing. It eventually all came out, but at the time, so that primer disc, multiple companies were working on it, and they just pulled the plug on it. But it was that kind of a thing. And I feel that Dune is such a complex universe. I mean, there's still people that believe that Dune is a white savior story, that Paul Atreides is this white messianic figure that comes to save the less primitive folks on Arrakis, which isn't the case. It certainly doesn't, as the story progresses into the other books, it isn't the case at all. But that's something you'd have to read the books to find out. I won't get into it here. Suffice to say, the 6 Dune books that Frank Herbert wrote span thousands of years of time and are very, very interesting, if that is your thing. But I think you're right, man. I really do think that in order to sell Dune, to get... look, they've only made the first half of the first book, and I want it to be successful, so they make more. But I think they need to take a different approach. They're acting like everybody knows Dune, that the entire world is we all know what Dune is. And that trailer, I liked the trailer a lot. I loved the imagery, although I think it is a little... I'm surprised that it's a lot in David Lynch's wheelhouse, and that surprised me. It's very Blade Runner 2049, so it is a lot of Denis Villeneuve, but I'm surprised at how it doesn't... I think it maybe needed a little bit more Chris Foss in it, at least in terms of color. But, I'll wait until I see the film. But I do think that they can't just assume that everybody knows what Dune is. And they have to educate people. I think it's important. So people then are like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, Elizabeth watched the trailer and she's not really up on her Dune. And she's like, well, that looks interesting. I'll see that. But, I just think that they need to sort of, you can't take Dune for granted. If I do say so myself. Can't do it. Jared Snyder's here. Jared Snyder says, oh, this is not for this show. This is this is a Whining About Movies letter. Doc Vader writes in, and Doc Vader says, greetings once again, Rob and our fellow imagination connoisseurs. Thank you for reading my last letter. And that was a great letter on Filipino horror movies. So here we go with my second letter on Filipino horror movies. As there were too many to mention, I forgot that post-war Manila had its fair share of horror-themed movies. Films like, Tong Paniki, Man Bat, Kame ni Satanas, Satan's Hand, and Multo sa Opera Ghost, are one of the few that I found interesting for my deep dive. Furthermore, in the following decades, had many experimenting on funny horror flicks with loosely translated titles like Dracula's Daughter-in-Laws, Dracula's baton, Dracula Goes to RP, and of course for the more serious caper in Batman Fights Dracula. Is that a real, like the Batman or a man-bat creature? One sexploitation horror film I recently watched was Vampire Hookers from 1978, starring John Carradine and directed by the brilliant Acrio Santiago, in which, in his own right, requires a separate letter. Additionally, the 1980s had Tyanak. It is a creature that mimics to be a newborn, but truly just is a way to lure its unlucky prey in. A remake of sorts was Hiwaga Sab... I'm killing this. Hiwaga Sab... Baltley Drive, Mystery at Baltlet Drive. This was based on an actual street where a woman in white haunted mostly men that were driving alone. We lived about 400 meters away from the street, and I can attest to its glum ambience. The 90s were dominated by 5 shake, rattle, and roll movies, in where a lot of separate episodes stand out. The most popular, those were anthology horror films. The most popular being a swang. Many different parts of the country had their own definition and stories of a swang. However, generally it is described as can either be a shape-shifting spirit or creature. It is a very versatile creature that can possess traits of a vampire, ghost, ghoul, witch, or anything in between. A story I do remember, though, was from my wife's hometown, in where people attended a wake of a suspected aswang. Traditionally, people flocked to give respects, gamble, and eat, but none did eat, as they believed the aswang's seed would be incorporated in the food and be passed on to the ignorant fool that would eat. Aswang was made into a feature film in 1992 by the great director, these names, Peck Galaga? It looks like Galaga, in where he expanded on the lore. He continued with 2 more Asian horror flicks, Halik and Vampira, Kiss of the Vampire, and Sa Piling Ning Swang in a Swang's company. I'm making a full stop for now as I'm very sleepy and would like to continue rambling about horror in Philippine cinema. You know what? I would love to know if you could maybe give me more of a phonetic so I can not read it like the idiot I am when it comes to the language. I'm sure it's making you hurt your ears. Calvin Bose is writing back about his journey through the James Bond novels. Dear Rob, as promised, I'm writing you as I go through the James Bond books and films in order, and in my last letter I gave my thoughts on Casino Royale and Live and Let Die. Now I've just finished the book Moonraker. This book starts with Bond and M on a personal outing at Blades to find out if one member is cheating at cards. But the day after Bond begins his real mission investigating a suicide that happens at Drax's Moonraker plant, the Moonraker is a newly advanced missile for the defense of London. At the plant, Bond meets a lady cop, and she is posing as a secretary for Drax. After investigating, Bond finds that Drax is actually working for the Soviet Union and is planning to use the Moonraker to blow up London. One interesting thing that happens in this book is that the woman turns out is engaged, and Bond watches her walk off with her fiancé at the end. This book is so fat, it's my favorite. I really love the Cold War feel of this book. This book even shows me more how the best way to go forward with the Bond films would be to set them back in the Cold War period, preferably the 50s. Tonight I'm starting Diamonds Are Forever, and I'll tell you about it when I finish it. Well, that's interesting, Calvin. Thank you for writing in about that. Yeah. Martin Lawrence writes in. Martin Lawrence says, greetings and salutations, Rob. I wanted to get your views on whether franchises or shared universes are detrimental to a film's greatness. A standalone movie can be great. It'll have a start, it'll have a middle, and a good resolution. Does it need to be connected to another movie? Does the protagonist need to pop up elsewhere for hugs and coffee with other movies' protagonists? The Bond franchise is tenuous at best, but I preferred it when Bond turned up, killed the bad guy, and walked off at the end. Now he's brooding over relationships from 2 movies ago. I don't want to see a Predator turn up in the Marvel Universe, which has been hinted at. Leave him to his own Predator business in a decent solo outing. I would love to get your thoughts on this, Rob. Yours sincerely, big fan, Martin Lawrence. Here's the thing. I love the MCU only because, you think about your comic books, going through my comic book collection, pulling old books, and I like the fact that the MCU emulates comics. I mean, I like that you have these shared universes, but no, I don't think every movie. I think the Daniel Craig Bond movies, when they decided to make it a shared universe, hurt those films. And because it seemed tacked on. Casino Royale was great. Standalone, in and out, done. How is a 00 forged? It's great. We see it, really like it, but then, with Quantum of Solace, with Skyfall, with Spectre, and now with No Time to Die, it's all part of the same story. And the problem is, like the sequel trilogy in Star Wars, they didn't come up with it all at once. So they're sort of grafting this meta story onto a franchise that was never supposed to have that. And I think that really has hurt these Bond movies. They haven't been allowed to be standalone Bond movies. I'm the architect of all your pain, James. Who cares? I mean, come on, dude. Are you trying to tell me that's no fun? Unless it's established and it is fun. It's not fun in the Bond movies. It's once again the Bond franchise chasing trends, which is something that started back in the 70s with Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun. Chasing blaxploitation movies, chasing martial arts movies, rather than setting the trends. The first Bond movies set trends, and then they're always chasing trends. And I don't think it works. But I like standalone films. However, I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is great. But look what DC did. DC, they can have their DC universe, and then they can make Joker. I would like to see Marvel do a standalone movie that's not connected to their extended universe. I don't know if they ever will do that, but it would be interesting to see if they did do that. I don't know. Yeah. Mike F. writes in. Hi, Rob, and to all the imaginary connoisseurs in the Post-Geek Singularity, imagination connoisseurs. You said, I love it, imaginary connoisseurs. All of you connoisseurs, you're all imaginary, figment of my imagination. You're not really here at all. You're not even watching the show. I'm just nuts. And I think I'm doing this YouTube show. I'm really actually in an asylum locked away somewhere, or in the Matrix. I want to share with you some information regarding Philippine cinema that I thought would interest you. Cinema today has been dominated by the comic book genre, with characters like Batman, Superman, Captain America, Iron Man, Wonder Woman, and many more. If America has those comic book characters, the Philippines has original comic book characters like Darna, Captain Barbell, Lastic Man, Tiny Tony, Dragona, and many more, all created by Mars Ravello, the king of Philippine comics. Darna is arguably considered the most popular Filipino superhero ever since her first appearance in 1950 on Filipino Comics issue 77. Darna's abilities are that she can fly, she has super strength, speed, agility, and such. The first film adaptation of Darna was released in 1951, a year after her debut, directed by Fernando Poe Sr., the father of Philippine cinema legend Fernando Poe Jr. Since 1951, there have been 14 Darna movies. Wow. Up to year 1994, as well as 3 TV show adaptations in 77, 2005, and 2009. What amazed me here is that as early as 1951, there's already a superhero movie in Philippine cinema. Right before the 1978 Superman movie hit big screens, 9 Darna movies had already existed. I haven't seen those old Darna movies yet, but I wonder what they look like, especially the visual effects. A new Darna movie adaptation was in the works, but the project has been postponed indefinitely. There's also Captain Barbell, a superhero whose characteristics are in the vein of Superman and Captain Marvel, or Shazam. The character debuted in 1963 on Pinoy Comics issue 5. The first adaptation of Captain Barbell was in the year 1964, a year after his debut. In total, there have been 5 Captain Barbell movies that have existed, the latest in 2003, as well as 2 TV show adaptations in 2005 and 2011. With this information, what stood out for me is that there's already been a lot of superhero movies in Philippine cinema as early as 1950, and that was decades before the dominance of the comic book genre today. Right now, there are not a lot of original Filipino superhero movies being released, and just like what was mentioned in a previous letter that was sent to you, Philippine cinema today is now dominated by genres like romance, comedy, drama, horror, and such. That's all for my letter today. I hope you find this information interesting, and if it's okay, I hope I can share more fun facts about Philippine cinema, because there are a lot more than I think are worth sharing. Also, someone recommended Filipino films to you in the Super Chat, which are On the Job, Buy Bust, General Luna, and Goyo. I recommend those films too. They are some of the best Filipino films in the past 10 years. I especially recommend Buy Bust to you since you love The Raid. Ooh, thank you and live long and prosper. Buy Bust. All right. Mike, thanks for writing in. What an education we're getting about Filipino genre cinema, which I don't know anything about. But my God, I have now something to delve into. I'm very excited about this. That's one of the real things that I love about this show. is that I learned something too. Ian Samuels is here, Rob and fellow Robservationists. And so, after what has felt like an eternity, we got our first proper look at Dune. Personally, I love the 1984 Lynch version, which I feel is a sci-fi masterpiece. It's unfortunate that it did not find its audience until its VHS release. So I was dubious about the casting of Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, and the trailer has not changed my mind based on what is shown in the trailer. I still think his casting was a mistake. Then we get the star Timothée Chalamet, whoever he is. This trailer is the first thing I've ever seen him in, and to be honest, I'm not impressed. He came across as a whiny teenager in the same vein as the Bruce Wayne we got in the awful Gotham TV series. He is no Muad'Dib. I don't know about that. I mean, he's supposed to be 15, so... I was nervous about this version of Dune due to the 1984 version failing to find its audience, and after Matt Reeves managed to put out an amazing teaser trailer for the Batman, despite having made, at best, 30% of the movie. Dune is a finished product, and this trailer is a huge disappointment. Wow, that's interesting. On the subject of the Batman, as most will know by now, production was supposed to restart last week. After 3 days, star Robert Pattinson was diagnosed with COVID and is now in isolation for 2 weeks while he recovers. Get better soon, Pattinson. From what we saw in that teaser trailer, you're doing a great job, and Gotham City needs you. Interesting. I like Timothée Chalamet, Call Me By My Name. You know, he was great in that. He's been great in other things, too. I think that I like the way he looked, you know, and Paul is supposed to be young. I mean, he looks much younger than Kyle MacLachlan did in the 84 and the Lynch version. We'll see. Jury's still out. I did think the tone of the trailer, it was very portentous, I guess. I wanted to see there could be a little bit more humor. I mean, in Lynch's version, it's a little wacky. I mean, you had Brad Dourif as Peter DeVries, and it's there's some craziness there. Kenneth McMillan, he'll know that it is I, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, that encompasses his doom. The Flying Fat Man. I mean, there's a lot of wackiness that this movie does not have any of that. So we'll see. But, you know, hope springs eternal. As you know, I hope everything is good until it's not. So I really hope it is good. Here's a letter from Jason Whitcomb. Dear Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity, this is my first letter in a while, as I needed to step away and take a deep breath from the internet and social media, as America and the world ain't so great yet, if you know what I mean. I think the Post-Geek Singularity is mostly great, but I needed to step away from things controversial as I needed a mental break. But I'm back, and I'm about to delve into a controversial subject. Sigh, I apologize in advance, but here it goes. As an African-American genre fan, and as a person, I found the passing of Chadwick Boseman, quite painful. Of course, he was a celebrity, and I'd never known the young man personally, but his portrayals of important African-Americans touched me deeply. He had a certain quiet calm that was reassuring, and being a genre fan, when I saw him first appear as T'Challa in Captain America Civil War, I couldn't help but smile with pride. Being 59, I've waited decades to see Black Panther hit the big screen. When Wesley Snipes announced a Black Panther movie back in the 90s, I was pretty excited. But that never happened, like so many other comic film adaptations floating around Hollywood back then. So finally, I get Black Panther, and I'm moved to actual tears at the end of the film. I see T'Challa turning to dust at the end of Avengers Infinity War, but I'm fine because it's a comic book movie, and comic book characters always come back. They never die, really. All this to say, Chadwick Boseman, the person, has died, and I, like millions or billions of others, are greatly saddened by his passing. But here's where I stick my toe into controversy. T'Challa, or Black Panther, hasn't died. I've read that there's a huge calling for Marvel to kill off or discontinue using T'Challa or Black Panther because Boseman was Black Panther. I say bullshit. Yes, I'll say it again. Bullshit. When Christopher Reeve was tragically injured and later sadly passed away, DC did not stop publishing Superman. Sure, there was the death of Superman, but we all know that had nothing to do with Reeve or his passing. So many, myself included, Christopher Reeve was Superman. Too many was Superman, and I thought any other actor playing the character in a film was blasphemy. In a sense, his shadow still looms over other actors portraying the character in films. Hell, Rob, you had to interview Brandon Routh, and I'm sure the poor guy was overwhelmed at times stepping into the role that was once Reeves. It's true. As online fandom wasn't what it is today, I'm sure he would have taken a pounding if that film were made today, with him being the first to theatrically play Superman post-Reeve. Cavill had it somewhat easier as he came post-Ralph. All this to say, I believe T'Challa Black Panther needs to be recast. I've heard people say the little sister should take over because somehow she does in the comics, which I've never read, but since when does Kevin Feige do exactly what the comics do? Never. To all the little black boys who were told they could never be Batman, I was one, or Superman, or another non-black comic character, to take Black Panther away would be absolutely devastating. To replace that character with a woman would, in my opinion, be even worse. Having a black male role model who is front and center and not a buddy or a sidekick is very, very important. So I say, respectfully, that Kevin Feige should find a fantastic young actor out there and gracefully present him as the new actor playing the character of T'Challa. It's not dishonoring Chadwick Boseman, it's actually honoring him in keeping the character he brought to the screen alive. Just my 2 cents. Sincerely, Jason. Great letter, Jason. You know what I have to say? At first, I don't know why Chadwick Boseman's passing affected me so much. I mean, he was a celebrity. I'd never met him. But he was one of those people like you, wherever I saw him, like whenever he did bits on various late-night talk shows, or watching him give that commencement speech, or watching him when he was visiting cancer patients in the hospital, kids. He had an intelligence and a sort of a quiet, like you said, a quiet. He was like the character. There was a soulful, spiritual, regal, royal nature about the man. You could tell he went to Howard University. He wanted to direct. He was obviously very, very, very intelligent, and the fact that he fought that disease the way he did. I mean, I'll be forever in awe of him. He represents, I think, the very best of humanity. And you saw it in all the roles he played. I first really recognized him in Get On Up. And by the way, I will say, I liked Gods of Egypt. Do I think Gods of Egypt is a great movie? No, it's wacky. I can't believe Gods of Egypt even got made. But Alex Proyas made it. Chad Boseman's in it. And no, I really am a big fan of his work. And he left a too short, but still a very good legacy of films. But I used to think, I was not on your side at first. I was like, why not they just create a new character? But I think you're right. I've sort of come around. I've been thinking about that. I think people need T'Challa. I think, look, you know what? Terrence Howard, they replaced him with Don Cheadle, and I love me some Don Cheadle. And I thought that was great casting. I think, look, I do not envy whatever young black actor or, 35-year-old black actor, whatever black actor is going to step into the role of T'Challa. Do not envy that person. But whoever it is, I mean, can you imagine? The guy's got to be, they're already going to know he's going to be a great actor, whoever that is. Killer performance we're going to have to get from him. And Kevin Feige wouldn't have it any other way. But I think that T'Challa should be recast. I really do. And, in a way, maybe the way you do that is you do it like they did with in the first place. You bring T'Challa back in a different Marvel movie. And then you do Black Panther 2. So you reintroduce the new Black Panther in the context of another film where people can get used to that performance. I think maybe that is probably the best way to do it. So yeah, I mean, but I think you're right. I think it needs to be recast. I think we need to see T'Challa again. This comes from Desmond. Hello, Toy Man. Hope you're well. I saw the trailer for Dune recently. The look and quality of the film seems okay, even though the trailer hardly shared what Dune is about. I agree. Nobody knows anything about it, really. However, there seems to be a trend that stands out with movies that stops my suspension of disbelief. The main leads, the male and female, look so young. Are we, the audience, meant to buy into the main leads who train or fight against seasoned veterans like Josh Brolin, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, Dave Bautista, or anyone similar? I get it's not all about the characters having physical size or presence, as there could be some diplomatic activities being done also. It's understandable for studios wanting to reach a younger audience to bring in profits. However, this could be a similar scenario like Valerian, where the casting takes you out of the film, due to not casting older leads to match up with the surrounding cast. In addition to Bond, I've always felt there was something missing in the series, that the villain or adversary, Korean, African, or Indian agencies, agents with their own stories and agendas, who could play out and kick Bond's ass every time in different movies they meet while not being the main focus of the movie's story. This could be that consistent thread obstacle throughout the stories that might be the person or persons who Bond is unwilling to ask for assistance in certain situations. I get it, Bond is meant to be the best. However, as a friend always reminds me, there's always a mountain beyond a mountain with people being the best at something. Your thoughts, kind regards, Desmond. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Sometimes, when VJ Armitage was in Octopussy, Bond met up with him. I mean, Bond's always meeting up with different station chiefs from somewhere. But I agree. I mean, it would be interesting to see Bond cross paths with more intelligence operatives from around the world. That would be kind of interesting. I like that idea. I think it's a good idea. I enjoy it. So, yes, that's great. But as far as Dune is concerned, Paul Atreides is supposed to be, in his teens. So having people like Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho, I mean, I don't mind them being older because he is supposed to be a kid. So I think you kind of need to do that. This letter comes from Aunt Brierly. Hi, Az and Rob. Az is who I've been doing our Prisoner 6 of 1 Prisoner review show. We've been going back and looking at all the Prisoner episodes. Hi, Az and Rob. Been watching and joining in on the chat on the live streams of The Prisoner since the first episode. It's great to see the show getting attention after things quieted down after the buzz from the 50th anniversary. I'm currently one of the primary organizers for the annual 6 of 1 The Prisoner Appreciation Society's convention, held in Port Marion every year. Sadly, 2020 had to be canceled because of COVID, but hopefully 2021 will be able to go ahead. 6 of 1 are on their usual social media platforms. I also co-manage them and post most of the content currently. The website is, here, I'll put the website link in the live chat if you're a Prisoner fan, and you should be. Let's see, paste that in there. That is linked there. I was also involved with another group of independent of 6 of 1 called the Prisoner Virtual Con. In April, we put on a virtual convention using Facebook and YouTube. And due to the success and feedback, we're doing another between the 25th and 27th of September. Most of the stuff shown is available on YouTube and might be of interest to you both. Well, this is cool. I'm going to pass this letter on to Az, but I'm going to put this in the live chat too so you can see what this group is doing. Maybe we can start a whole prisoner revolution online or something. I like that. So there you go. Aunt Brierly. Well, Aunt, thank you. Be seeing you. Thanks for writing that in. And thanks for sharing those links. Hope people can watch them. This one comes from Jared Snyder. Jared says, Dear Rob and fellow members of the Post-Geek Singularity, we are recipients of lively imaginations, but along the way we experience events that supercharge our imaginations and bring things to a whole other level. Here is the event that did that to me. On September 11th, 1966, my hometown of Essex, Connecticut was attacked by a monster called the Gloakis. At least that is what our first selectman, our version of the mayor, and the wealthiest man in town, Fred Knapp, wanted everyone to believe. They had decided to prank the town to get everyone to loosen up, but their plan went horribly wrong. Is this true? They convinced the editor of the local newspaper to run a description of their encounter with a terrifying beast in the woods in the September 11th issue, and as the day progressed, a growing panic spread through the schools and across the town. By the time school was out, parents were whisking their children home, fearing not just the Gloakis, but the armed bands of men and boys out in the woods searching for it. The state police switchboard was flooded with people reporting sightings of the creature or finding its lair, or some even reporting wounding it. It got so bad by the evening, radio stations in the area had to broadcast an announcement declaring it was all a hoax and begging people to remain calm. For a 9-year-old, watching the adults around you go batshit crazy is something you never forget. Years later, when I tried to interview witnesses, the perpetrators laughed, the pranked adults dismissed the whole thing, and those of us who were children retained vivid, lasting memories of how powerful the human imagination can be. You can find my story on the Gloakis here. Best regards, Jared M. Snyder. Wow. Okay. Well, I don't know if this letter is a put on or if the Gloakis event actually occurred. Kind of like the night that panicked America with Orson Welles, but I'm putting it in the live chat. Here is a link. By the way, I like that name, the Gloakis. It's a Gloakis. It's coming. It's coming for all of you now. Stay away in a world where you must stay away from the Gloakis. Now I'm going to say that all day long. Thanks a lot for that, Jared. Now I got the earworm of Gloakis in my mind. Omar94 writes in. Omar says, "Hi, Rob. I hope you and your loved ones are doing okay with all that's happening on the West Coast so far. Now that the trailer for Dune has come and we've seen it, the big question now is whether the movie will be good. I remember watching a Harlan Ellison interview where he talked about David Lynch's version. He felt Dune is a book that should not be adapted, saying it's a book that shouldn't be shot, a script that can't be written, a directorial job beyond anyone's doing, a production that would bankrupt 3 studios, and marketed in a way that wouldn't make sense and nobody would understand. Let's hope Denis Villeneuve proves Ellison that Dune can be pulled off. Thanks, and live long and prosper." Well, we shall see. We shall see. This one comes from John. John says, "Hi, Rob. It's been a while since I've written you a letter. I believe it's been since the end of Picard, really. I still listen to the show and enjoy it, but I haven't had the inspiration to write to you again until now. I just finished watching a Star Trek fan production that was released this week called Star Trek First Frontier. It appears to have been grandfathered in outside of the current reactions or restrictions on the Star Trek fan productions, as it appears to have been in production since at least 2015. That is correct. I'm not sure why it took this long to release, but the description in the YouTube video indicates that the pandemic led to issues with its production this year, so they were forced to release it in its current state. The film itself I enjoyed overall. The first flaw is noticeable once the characters start talking is that the audio mixing is all over the place. Yeah, that's the downfall of so many fan films is the audio. Unfortunately, I had to adjust my volume throughout the production to hear the characters talking and balance that between the music and special effects. The music used for the film is a mix of classic Star Trek tracks, and the selection is excellently used. I thought the cast did a decent job, and I was impressed with the performance of the leading man as Captain Robert April. There's one action scene on the Enterprise that felt campy beyond TOS standards for me, but the rest of the action in the movie is well done by fan film standards, and I enjoyed how much of the movie was just characters talking to each other without screaming or cursing. Anyway, that's my brief review of the film. I really hope they were able to improve the audio mixing in some way because I feel that would elevate my rating of the film from 6.5 out of 10 to probably a 7 or 8 out of 10. One of my Trek friends did remind me that TOS prior to being remastered also had issues at times with hearing dialogue during episodes. No, it didn't. Not really. It's really a shame that CBS's fan production guidelines mean nothing of this quality will probably ever be made again. Here's a link to the film. Thanks for reading, John. Yeah, you know what? I watched First Frontier. I liked it. I thought it was great. There's a lot of, and when I say great, it's great as far as fan films go. I really like the effort. I thought it was nicely done. More importantly, it was finished. So kudos to all the filmmakers for getting it finished. I have a lot to say about Star Trek fan films, but I'm going to refrain. I'm going to refrain. But look, I admire anybody that's a feature-length fan film. So kudos to them for doing it. A long time coming, and they stuck with it, which I think is great. So now let's see what you people are saying. What are you saying over here? Let's see. A lot of people. Wow, a lot of people have fired in. Let me get back to where was I? Let's see. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, "What's up, Rob? So U.S. cases still are coming down. They've plummeted from close to 70,000 cases in July to the 20,000 range for the past 3 days, minus another full lockdown. So, Rob, does this make you more confident most Americans have sobered up?" No. After watching clips from Trump's rally, no. And, our president is still not, until the tone has to be set from the top. And until our president comes out and says, wear a mask and does it all the time himself, I'm not confident. We're rolling into, it might be burning in California, but it's snowing in Colorado, and we might be soon. Things are going to be getting worse, so we'll see. Look, fingers crossed. I hope we get better. I mean, I don't think anyone should give us a pat on the back for we're about to pass 200,000. Pardon me, if I was Joe Biden and I made that mistake, it would be it would have been turned into like a techno song. 2 million, 2 million, 2 million. But yes, 200,000 people. But, you know, I mean, you'd think by this time it should be coming down, right? I mean, we've only been socially distancing and things for 7 months now. Maybe we're finally getting it right, but I hope so. Calvin Bose sends in a tip and says, if this new rule for best picture was implemented, my Clara Bow script I'm working on could not win best picture because the story involves 1920s Hollywood. To qualify, I would have to change history and make Clara Bow black. This will ruin films. Now, come on, Calvin. No, you would not have to make Clara Bow black. By the way, Prince sang about Clara Bow. Just saying. I don't think you're going to have to worry about it. Look, the guidelines are not going to be they're not as catastrophic as people might seem. I think it'll be okay. I really do. Willow sends in, wow, look, everybody's talking about the same thing. Willow sends in a tip and she says, I don't agree with having quotas. However, if I understand correctly, any film can still qualify for Best Picture under the new rules as long as the film companies themselves are training and giving job opportunities to underrepresented groups and including them on their marketing and distribution teams. The Irishman isn't what people would typically consider to be a diverse film, yet it already meets 3 out of the 4 criteria, and you only need to meet 2 in order to qualify. Well, Willow is correct, and I think there's a lot of ways you can qualify. I'm not really worried about it. I just think the one thing, as I've said, the more voices that are heard. I mean, it's not necessarily about the color. Sure, do we want people of color? That's fine, but it's not the color of the skin that matters. It's the experience of living in a world with that colored skin, and how did that shape you? Those are the voices that we need to hear from. We need to hear from the individual voices. It's not just about color. But when you're, say, black in America, your experience of America is very different than if you're white in America. And what we need is more understanding of that black experience today. You know, when I get in my car and if I'm stopped by the cops, I never think twice about it. I'm like, I better have my insurance paid up. That's all I think about. I don't think about where I need to put my hands on the steering wheel to make sure that I don't get killed. And I've never thought that. And that kind of experience and what makes it different, we need those voices. That's why I think it's great. Anything that gets more people into making films, people with different voices, people are going to make movies I haven't seen before, the better off we're all going to be in the long run. So anything that gets, whether it's people of color, whether it's women, whether whomever, the more voices we have making films, I think the better off we're going to be. Dan V says, I think the use of the cover song in the Dune trailer, that was Pink Floyd's Eclipse off Dark Side of the Moon, Brain Damage and Eclipse is kind of his one song, was a mistake where it didn't fit and only makes sense to fans who know about Jodorowsky's Dune. The movie has to get delayed to 2021 to have a shot. I have a hard time seeing it as a box office hit. Yeah, so first of all, what Dan was saying, Alejandro Jodorowsky, whose box set I look for, I don't know where it went. It was here. I know somebody didn't just take it. I don't know where my Jodorowsky box set went. How wooed. I don't know. It's here somewhere, though. I don't know. I just had it. But Alejandro Jodorowsky was going to make Dune in the 70s, and you can watch the documentary, Jodorowsky's Dune. And he was going to have Pink Floyd score the movie, which would have been really cool. So people think that they used that song in homage to Alexander Jodorowsky. I don't think they did. But maybe they did, but I don't think they would. But yeah, I thought the trailer, the imagery was great. But if you don't know what Dune is, I think that, you know, like I said on the John Campea show, the first Dune book, at least the first half of the Dune book, is about the blood feud that has been going on for hundreds of years between the Harkonnens and the Atreides. And the Harkonnens have their planet, Giedi Prime, and the Atreides have their planet, Caladan. And they're like these great feudal houses. The Landsraad is what it's called, all the different feudal, whatever you want to call it. They make up the Landsraad. And they've been feuding. And the Harkonnens control the planet Arrakis. They run the mining operations there, and because of certain shenanigans that are being pulled behind the scenes, the Atreides are then given the planet Arrakis, which is the most valuable planet in the universe because of the spice melange, and it's all an elaborate plot for the Harkonnens and the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV to get rid of the Atreides. And you don't know that. It's very Game of Thrones-esque, and that's how I think they should be selling it. But I think you're right. It depends. If the movie's really good, I don't know if it's going to be a box office hit or not. Maybe it will be. I hope so. Dan V goes on to say, I said from the beginning that it should have been a TV show on HBO. I don't disagree with that. We did see the TV miniseries that was done for Sci-Fi Channel, but obviously it was done for very little money. It was the best shot getting through the first 6 books. I know there's a Bene Gesserit show in development, but it's not happening if the film flops. I want to be wrong, though, but it's tough. Look, I agree with you. Only doing the first half of Dune with no sequel if it flops is a big gamble too, and Warner Brothers would want it to be a franchise. I just really think it should have been a TV show with a $10 million an episode budget like Westworld, The Crown, and certain Game of Thrones seasons. Look, I don't disagree with you. I mean, Dune, by the way, the concepts, it's out there what happens through all 6 books. It would have made the best TV series ever for HBO if they decided to do all of that. I don't know. We shall see. But I don't disagree with you, and it's going to be interesting. With their marketing right now, I see it as a Blade Runner 2049 situation where the movie turns out to be really good, but nobody goes to see it. And nobody goes to see it. I mean, Dune is not Lord of the Rings. Actually, to be honest, it was kind of Lord of the Rings. Dune and Lord of the Rings, both big in the 60s, both big in college campuses, but Dune is not now like the Lord of the Rings are. You know, you can't just expect people to know what it is. I think they really needed to. Their marketing campaign should have educated people more about what is this movie. You know, I think they really leaned too heavily in on Paul Atreides in the trailer, but that's just me. Rodrigo is here. Rodrigo sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, I watched Jodorowsky's Dune the other day, and I was blown away by its awesome story. Do you think his vision would have made a good Dune movie? Sad to know he never got the chance to bring it to life. Do I think Jodorowsky's... You know, my favorite Jodorowsky movie is Santa Sangre. I like El Topo, and I like The Holy Mountain, and I haven't seen, like, there's, like, Sex Magic or whatever the hell his new movie that's in this box set, which I can't wait to see. But his Dune looked a little bonkers. You know, it really... I mean, if people were taking psychedelics and reading Dune, because I think there's the idea of expanding your consciousness through LSD is definitely part of the DNA of the Dune. That's what the spice melange does. But it certainly would have been interesting. It certainly would have been interesting. I certainly would love to have seen it, Rodrigo, and I'm sorry we didn't. But I would love to have seen it. Michael Rodriguez sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob, thank you for all your hard work. Oh, you're welcome. I've been following you since the Heroes days. Your taste in retro TV and movies are unique. I am now reliving Space 1999. I've not watched this since I was a kid. FYI, I also had an Eagle, too. Thanks again, Rob. Well, Michael, you're welcome. And, you know, season 1 and 2 there is a vast difference between them. I'm a big fan of season 1. Season 2, not so much, but I still like it. And I love seeing the Eagles. So, yeah. I'm glad you're enjoying that. You got to watch UFO, though. It's the precursor to Space 1999. Justin Toner says, hi, Rob. Movie night with my friends Wednesday was a success. 1994's Lion King looked great in 4K, and my friends had never seen The Black Hole, and they enjoyed it, flaws and all. We spent a good 15 minutes after talking about the film and the ending. What, just 15 minutes? So I enjoy watching films with my friends and chatting about them after. The shared movie experience is special, which is why I love the Post-Geek Singularity community. Oh, well, thank you. Thanks, Rob. P.S. My last name is pronounced like paper toner. Oh, Justin Toner. Okay. All right, Justin. Got it right. Justin Toner. Mark C. Mark C. says, so I watched Cuties. That's the Netflix film everybody's up in arms about because it sexualizes girls. So I watched Cuties. The defenders are correct about it being against what many are upset about. However, you don't preach against murder by making a snuff film. Well, Mark, I love that. Yeah, I also think what's really interesting to me is, you have a female director of color who's making a very autobiographical movie about her own experience. And I feel that is something that's kind of being lost in all of this. Does she not get a say? Is anybody not going to speak up and say, well, this is her experience? I think it's very important that we honor that, or we try and think about it. Sometimes, I understand why people are up in arms, but sometimes I think that, people need to see something. Obviously, sexualizing little girls is a terrible thing. I mean, we have stripped away, our society has really destroyed the ability for children to be children. And I think people should be able to kids should hold on to their childhoods for as long as possible. And we should definitely be supporting that. But yeah, our civilization, Western civilization, especially the youth, certainly has a skewed version of. We've not done a good job for protecting children from their allowing their innocence to remain as long as possible, and it's pretty horrifying. But I like that. You don't preach against murder by making a snuff film. Wow, what a great line. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, there are a few events in history where you can feel the future shifting. The future was supposed to go in a specific direction, but the event on 9/11 shifted it on its axis for the world. Another such event was when COVID-19 spread beyond the local outbreak. No, I agree with you, Stubble. I mean, I think that 9/11 was and also because of television, it was an event. It's probably the most seen historical event in history in terms of the footage. I mean, it's just, yeah. Unbelievable. But yeah, things change, and they change forever. Jason Whitcomb thank you for your letter, by the way. Robert, I'm glad Campia cleared up the actual rules, re the best picture. When this topic arose here the other day, the chat was saying you can no longer make any more creative movies. Hollywood is woke. No, one can make whatever the hell they want. Amen. Yeah, I too was a little miffed at first about it all, because I just think that everybody's starting to legislate things. I mean, everybody means well, but we're going to wind up with more massive bureaucracy than we already have. And I think there's something else to take into consideration. Making movies, as I was talking about the other day, is fucking hard. And even the people that want to get into it, it's like banging your head against a wall. And the people that actually get in, I think, like I've said, if you're talented, anybody these days can make a movie. Anybody. And the fact that you have to expect to be let in. Look, you think about all the people that broke through the indie boom, the indie explosion of the late 80s. That's how Spike Lee started. That's how Steven Soderbergh started. They went out and they just started making movies. And they got attention because their movies were good. They're unique. Soderbergh, and if you look at the Soderbergh and Spike Lee, fairly contemporary together, She's Gotta Have It and Sex, Lies, and Videotape. It's interesting that S&S, the letter S. Today's career is brought to you by the letter S. So Spike Lee and Steven Soderbergh both made two breakout films, one very different from each other, but show that both men had one a white Jewish dude, the other a short black guy. But they had verve, and they had a uniqueness to them and a freshness to them. And it was clear that both men were very talented filmmakers out of the gate. And, nobody helped them. And I think that they're the lesson to look to and go, okay, Spike Lee and Steven Soderbergh, that's kind of where that indie explosion happened that led, of course, in the 90s, we ended up getting people like Doug Liman and Quentin Tarantino, of course, and Kevin Smith and other filmmakers. And but really, Spike Lee and Steven Soderbergh back, man, they just started making their movies. That's what you have to do. You can't wait for somebody to let you in a door. Because if you have real talent, then people are going to come clamoring after you, like Olivia Wilde. They're like, okay, yes, you're an actress, and that's fine. You had this directing aspirations, but if a lot of actors can't direct, she blew it out of the park. I mean, she really did a good job, and now she's got a career. Swack Props says, the minute Bond saw her leaning over his baccarat table in that immaculate low-cut dress, he was absolutely smitten and knew then and there that she was a keeper. Rest in peace, Dame Diana Rigg. We have all the time in the world. Can't do it well. Usually my Louis Armstrong is better than that. But yes, Louis Armstrong did sing We Have All the Time in the World from that soundtrack. There is no opening song in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's an instrumental. It's a great instrumental, but it's instrumental. Yes, she's amazing. And that dress, whoo, boy, Diana Rigg was a beautiful woman. And, of course, we remember her as Mrs. Tyrell in Game of Thrones in her later years, but she also was, of course, Mrs. Peel in The Avengers. The Avengers on TV in the 60s. But you are right, Swack Props. Rest in peace, Diana Rigg. Jason Whitcomb says, Rob, I love Lifetime movies. They're a guilty pleasure. They're like porn without the sex. Lurid tales of horny babysitters, jealous ex-wives, sleazy doctors. Eric Roberts has an evil doctor series, and more. They're a hoot. Well, Jason, I have the dubious, or maybe the great distinction of working in one of the, I would call it lesser episodes, or lesser movies. I edited a Lifetime movie called I Know Where Lizzie Is. So if you ever see that, I think you're right. I think those every time. I don't watch very many of them, but every time I see a trailer for one, I'm like, I'd watch this. It looks great. I mean, like you said, they're like cheesy late night softcore films without the softcore. They just have the thriller parts. Emil Johansson is here, and Emil says, did the Dune trailer fail as a marketing tool? Are audiences invested enough to watch the movie without heavy trailer magic? I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. I think that trailer just assumed that everybody thinks Dune is this great thing. I would have done something totally different. Look, I love the trailer. I'm watching the trailer going, okay, there we go. There's everything I wanted to see. But having read the script, there's so many scenes. Like, maybe the next trailer will concentrate on all the character moments because they're great. Like, you have Paul talking to the Reverend Mother, but that's about it. You don't get to see you see the Beast Raban, but I want to see him talk. They didn't show anybody really talk, and except Paul. I need to see more of that, but I think they're going to have to work their trailer magic soon. Calvin Bose says, my sons Braxton and Hedrickson want you to do a Hard Day's Night on Elizaviews. They watch that film a lot, probably because of music. That's not a bad idea, a Hard Day's Night. We could do that, the Beatles' Hard Day's Night. Oh, by the way, for those of you who, if you enjoy watching Elizabeth and I talk movies, we're doing John Carter tonight at 7 o'clock. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind souls from across the 28 known galaxies. John Carter, based on Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels. John Carter, tonight, 7 o'clock on Elizaviews. Tune in. Let's see. Paul in Long Beach says, Rob, something happened during the show on Wednesday. Did you feel it? For those of a certain age, yourself, me, and Mayor Mike, well, we all slipped into the phone booth. We jumped into the quantum realm or rode in the DeLorean. I don't necessarily know exactly what you're referring to. Is that because I titled my show, Come On and Dune, Dune, Doom, Ah, Doom. Dune, Dune, Dune. You know what? Somebody wrote me and said, actually on the comments, and goes, no one remembers Zoom. Maybe that's not what you're referring to, but I thought, how can you not know Zoom? It's time to roll out the barrel. Boston, Mass. 02134. Now I remembered it. Send it to Zoom. Emil Johansson sends in a tip and says, I disagree with you. I like that they have people who are invested in Dune making Dune for people invested in Dune and not for casual morons. It makes for a better movie. And if they market for casuals, they lose their soul. Listen, I think Dune, they're making an incredible movie, and the script is incredible. But you still have to get the audience to come see it. What you want to do is you want to convert people that don't know what Dune is and turn them into Dune acolytes to sing the praises of Frank Herbert's crazy universe. That's what we want to have happen. Oh, Paul in Long Beach goes on to say, when we popped out on the other side of our trip during your show, the words tapes and Woodward were popular again. How 70s can we get? Damn, 2020 is weird. 2020 is weird, Paul. It is weird. Tapes. I can't help it. Justin Time to Chat says, hey, Rob, sorry I already asked this, but I couldn't find your response. I have CBS All Access, and it has literally all Star Trek content. I was wondering where the correct starting point is and if you could help me out in the different timelines. You rock. Well, Justin, as I have said, here's the Robert Burnett preference of how you start watching Star Trek. Do not watch The Cage. Don't watch The Cage. Don't watch The Cage. Don't ever watch The Cage. Okay? No Cage. It was a failed pilot. It was never on TV until 1988. They rejected it. Okay? How you watch Star Trek. How you start Star Trek. I know. You're going to be like, well, Rob, this isn't in broadcast order. Listen to your Uncle Bobby here. You start and you watch Where No Man Has Gone Before. That's the second Star Trek pilot. It's the first time you meet Kirk and Spock. Then you watch The Man Trap. Then you watch Charlie X. And then you go from there. That's how you start watching Star Trek. And then you watch, of course, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine. And by the way, I love Deep Space Nine. But if you want to watch Deep Space Nine, you can really just watch Emissary, the pilot, and then watch Duet, which is the penultimate episode of the first season, then watch In the Hands of the Prophets. I know, I'm terrible. You're terrible, Muriel. I'm terrible. So anyway, so there you go. But that's where you should start. Wow. So Jason Whitcomb is back, and he says, Google images of Darna. All right, everybody who's here in the live chat, we're going to do this together. We are going to we're all going to Google Darna, Darna, the Filipino, and look at images. Oh my. Wow. So this is the Filipino superheroine that they've been making movies of since the 50s. Wow. I am in. I'm in 100%. There we go. You know what? I don't know Darna. It's so crazy. How do I not know this? Well, see, look what you learn. It is Darna, the fictional Filipino comic superhero created by writer Mars Ravello and artist Nestor Redondo. The character's first appearance was in Filipino Comics number 77 on May 13th, 1950. That is so cool. I love that. Jason, thanks for making us Google that. I'm glad we just all had an experience together. Stubble McShave says, in the last Robservations show, I sent in a tip about the Dune trailer and images of the Wine Spring Inn from the Wheel of Time series. You couldn't find the image of it on the show, so I sent a pic of it to you on Twitter yesterday. And yes, I saw that pic. It looks like a lovely place that I would want to drink from. I should go get it on Twitter, but I don't know how far back it would go. Calvin Bose says, do you remember after 9/11 seeing American flags everywhere? And if you wanted one, stores are all sold out. I do. I also remember the entire world was on our side back then. Alexander Wilson says, Dr. Fauci said that we won't be able to sit in theaters without masks until a year after the vaccine is created. He said the earliest that may happen is the fall of 2021. Look, there has never been a coronavirus vaccine, ever. And I think that's probably true, but I don't mind. I mean, if they find out theaters won't be super spreader locations, I'll go see movies and wear a mask. I mean, I will. We'll see how it goes. I'm not going to do it now. I don't want to be a guinea pig. But, yeah. Emil Johansson says, do you think makers put their own thoughts into their products? Like when Ozymandias in Snyder's Watchmen says, your schoolboy heroics are redundant. Was that Snyder dissing Superman? I don't know if he was dissing Superman. I'm sure it was... all of Watchmen is kind of... It's a deconstruction of our favorite superheroes and the comic book medium in general. So I think that's part of it. I think it's part of it. You know? But I do think all creators put something of themselves in their movies. I mean, I really do. So, yeah. Julius Goodwin's here. Hello, Julius. How are you, sir? Having read all of the Dune novels and seen the original movie long ago, I've never understood why the Bene Gesserit, essentially a cult dedicated to female superiority, would want to create a male version of themselves possessing their abilities. Well, I don't know if they necessarily wanted it to be a male version of themselves. They weren't supposed to do that. Paul Atreides, Lady Jessica bared Paul for them, but what's her face? I forget her name. Like the best of them, who was in Chapter House Dune. She's got I don't remember her name, but that's a good question to ask. But they didn't. I don't think they did want the Kwisatz Haderach to be a male, or at least not now, because they were, it was going to be controlled breeding forever. I think they wanted her to be a woman. Mike Ryan sends in a tip and says, "I just found you and really enjoying." Well, thanks, Mike. I hope you continue to enjoy. Thank you for supporting the channel. Welcome, and for those new subscribers, do that thing, subscribe, hit the notification button, and all that. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the Post-Geek Singularity community. We're very happy to have you. Alexander Wilson sends in a tip and says, according to History 101, that most watched event in TV history was the 1996 Olympic opening ceremony when Muhammad Ali lit the torch. Interesting, your thoughts. Well, here's the thing. That was actually a single event. I totally believe that, because after all, he is the greatest of all time. He stings like a bee. Who doesn't want to say it? I remember that, man. That was you can't, first of all, I don't know if people understand, but when you were a kid in the 70s, like, the coolest person, and it never, again, as a child of the 70s, the race never came into it. The coolest person that lived on the planet Earth, more so than Evel Knievel, more so than Joe Namath, the coolest person on the planet Earth was Muhammad Ali. First of all, I didn't even understand what Muhammad Ali meant. I didn't understand Cassius Clay turn. I didn't get all that. I just knew that Muhammad Ali, just saying the name, was the coolest guy. And whenever you'd see him, it was always a treat whenever he showed up on TV, because I wanted to talk like Muhammad Ali. I wanted to be as witty as Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, and he was the baddest motherfucker on the planet. He was. Muhammad Ali was the man. Now, of course, later in life, he obviously developed health problems because of fighting. But I remember that, man. When he lit that Olympic torch, we all were watching. I mean, I didn't mean to equate that with like 9/11, but that event, I mean, it was a whole... The whole world loved Muhammad Ali. I think the entire planet Earth loved Muhammad Ali, and still does. Who doesn't love Muhammad Ali? But yeah, that was an amazing event. On another note, Reaches K sends in a tip and says, The Vampire Hookers, which is another Filipino horror film, the movie cover tagline reads, "Warm blood isn't all they suck." Wow. Boy, I miss the days when we were mature, don't you? Claudius is here. Hello, Claudius. How are you? Bonjour, Monsieur Robert, and the Post-Geek Singularity. How are you? I'm very glad Campia was able to explain the Academy's new diversity rules better than my Facebook message. Now we need rules for more Darna. I know, man. Now I'm going to be obsessed with Darna. I hope Arrow releases the entire box set of Darna. Claudius goes on and says, Rob, I've been listening to Katrina Longsworth's podcast. You must remember this. I've heard one. She's amazing. I'm listening to the series on Charles Manson's Hollywood. Wow. The real story is wilder than most movies. Scientology, celebrities, music, drugs, and orgies. I know. What's not to love, right? Well, I'll tell you what is not to love. What's not to love is the end of this stream, ladies and gentlemen. Gentle souls, kind beings from across the 28 known galaxies. Robservations, 510. Can you believe it? 510. Come to an end. I will be back tomorrow from here, the Robservatory. But tonight, join Elizabeth Gwendolyn Bell, the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, and myself for Elizaviews episode number 73, where we're going to talk about John Carter. That's right, Andrew Stanton's awesome science fiction film and romantic film. John Carter and Deja Thoris. What? Why don't they make another one? Come on, man. John Carter. If you haven't seen John Carter, check it out. It's a unfairly maligned science fiction film that you probably could watch on a double feature with Flash Gordon for the rest of your life if you really wanted to. But yes, we're gonna have fun tonight, and Elizabeth picked it. By the way, we're probably gonna do the verdict. We keep poor verdict. Sitting them at one of my favorite movies. We're going to do it. We are going to do the verdict. I promise. Anyway, so that's what we're doing. Anyway, where am I? I just got a weird phone call, and the computer answers the phone sometimes, so it's strange. What I was going to say is, yes, join us tonight, 7 o'clock for John Carter in a mere 3 hours. I want to thank everybody for being here today. First of all, I want to thank everybody for the generous support of the channel. I want to thank all of you for sending in videos. By the way, you're going to be able to see a new B.L. Alley video tonight on Elizaviews. You know B.L. Alley's videos. They're pretty hilarious. He's been pumping them out fast and furious. So B.L. Alley has another one tonight. See that on Elizaviews Whining About Movies 73. 7 o'clock. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel generously through super chats and tips and all that. I want to thank you for writing in letters and sending me videos. If you would like to have me read a letter on the show, write to me at the Burnettwork website. That's theburnettwork.net. And up in the top right-hand corner, you will see a place to send me letters and videos. And I will play them and show them. And that's what half the show's about. So, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, I would like to thank my moderators, the Richard, Robert Pariso is here today. Haynock is here. And, wow, you know what? Torrin Atkinson sent in a chat that I did not read today that says, I wonder if, I look at these things on Stream Elements and they come through. There's things I haven't said. Torrin Atkinson says, what the hell, man? Is there like a lot of this that I'm missing out on? Filmed my scenes on a sci-fi comedy Time Helmet yesterday with Peter New. Now I can shave off the stash, but will I? To be decided. Find it on Indiegogo. Plug. Well, one of our, Torrin Atkinson, one of the founding members of the Post-Geek Singularity, Time Helmet. You want to check that out? Wow, somehow there's some weird, that did not show up. Let me go through here. Ricky B. writes in, The Father, director Florian Zeller, screenplay Florian Zeller, and Christopher Hampton. I missed that. I wonder how much more have I missed of this chat? Wow. Nay sends in a super chat and says, Dan Trachtenberg, Cloverfield Lane, and he directed the first episode of The Boys. Where is he? He's great. I don't know where he is. Wow, I don't know where half of these chats came from either. As I'm going back and looking at, there's all kinds of wacky stuff happening. What else have I missed on today's chat? They're not showing up. I don't know why. Well, anybody, if I've missed you, I'm looking back through here, and I don't know why certain things didn't show up, but I will find you, and I will find out who sent what to where and why, and I don't understand how come these things have happened. You know what? Before I go off, I'm going to make sure because if somebody sent me in a super chat or tip or something and I missed it, that means I'm a dick. So, I'm going back, and I'm going to see if I can find it and find anything that I may have missed. Let's see. I'm just going to go back real quick. Greg Smith's here. I want to say thanks, Greg Smith. Listen, if I missed something, if somebody sent me in a big chat, a super chat or something, I will make sure I'll go back and look at it. There's all kinds of craziness. strangeness, weirdness happening. Anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everybody in the Post-Geek Singularity, have a better day. And come visit us tonight at 7, and come back tomorrow for Robservations 511. All right? And that is it.